The coffee pot slipped from Marcus Webb's trembling fingers at exactly 11:47 p.m., shattering across the diner's checkered floor in a spray of glass and burnt Colombian roast. His manager, Dennis Keller, stood 3 feet away with his arms crossed, the termination paperwork already printed and waiting on the counter. "You're done, Webb. Pack your locker and get out." Marcus stared at the spreading dark puddle, his reflection warping in the liquid. 23 years. 23 years of double shifts, of scrubbing grease traps until his knuckles bled, of smiling through every humiliation because his daughter Lily needed health insurance. 23 years ending because he'd given away money that wasn't even the diner's. It had happened 6 hours earlier, during the lunch rush. The man had appeared in the doorway like a ghost, his clothes hanging off skeletal shoulders, his eyes hollowed out by something beyond hunger. Marcus had seen that look before. He'd worn it himself 2 years ago, after the cancer took his wife Sarah and the medical bills took everything else. The man hadn't said a word, just stood there swaying slightly, and Marcus had felt the weight of every customer's disgusted stare. Someone had called the police. Someone always called the police. But before the sirens could wail down 5th Street, before the officers could arrive to move the problem somewhere less visible, Marcus had crossed the diner floor with the $20 bill folded in his palm. His last tip from the morning shift. The money that would have bought Lily's medication refill tomorrow. "Eh," Marcus had said quietly, pressing the bill into the man's hand. "There's a shelter on Maple Street. They serve dinner at 6. The man's fingers had closed around the money, and for just a moment, something human had flickered in those dead eyes. He'd opened his mouth as if to speak, then simply nodded and disappeared back into the November cold. Marcus had returned to wiping down tables, thinking nothing more of it, until Dennis emerged from his office, his face purple with rage, holding up his phone. "You just cost us a customer, Webb." Mrs. Patterson saw the whole thing. "She's posting about it right now. Says we're enabling drug addicts. So she'll never eat here again, and neither will her book club." He was just hungry. He was bad for business. And now, thanks to you, we're about to get review bombed by every concerned citizen in this town. Dennis had snatched the termination papers from the printer. "You're a janitor, not a social worker. You don't get to make those calls." Now, standing in the spreading coffee, Marcus felt the diner spin around him. No job meant no insurance. No insurance meant no chemotherapy for Lily, whose leukemia had returned 3 months ago with a vengeance. No chemotherapy meant watching his 7-year-old daughter fade away the same way her mother had, helpless and apologizing for being a burden. "I said pack your locker." Dennis's voice cut through the fog. "Or do I need to call someone to escort you out?" Marcus's hands moved automatically, gathering his things. The photo of Lily on her 6th birthday, gap-toothed and laughing. The coffee mug Sarah had given him before she got sick, the one that said "World's okayest, Dad." The spare uniform shirt that smelled like bleach and defeat. The other staff members wouldn't meet his eyes. Carlos, who'd worked the line for 15 years, suddenly found the grill fascinating. Jennifer, the night waitress who'd borrowed money from Marcus more times than she could count, studied her order pad like it contained the secrets of the universe. They'd all seen the post. They all knew that in a town this small, defending Marcus meant painting a target on their own backs. Outside, the November wind bit through his thin jacket. Marcus stood on the sidewalk, watching the diner's neon sign flicker, and tried to remember how to breathe. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Chen, the neighbor who watched Lily after school. "Lily's asking when you'll be home. She says her stomach hurts again. The nausea. It was always worse at night." Marcus started walking. He had $43 in his checking account and a daughter who needed medicine that cost $800 every 2 weeks. He had a rent payment due in 5 days that he was already 2 weeks late on. He had a car with a check engine light that had been on for 6 months and a credit score that made payday lenders laugh in his face. He had nothing. Nothing except a memory of a homeless man's eyes, briefly human, briefly grateful. Was that worth his daughter's life? Marcus didn't know. He only knew that in the moment when that man had stood in the doorway, he'd stopped being a problem to be removed and become a person who needed help. And Marcus, who'd spent 2 years accepting help from strangers after Sarah died, who'd stood in food bank lines and cashed sympathy checks and swallowed his pride 1,000 times over, couldn't walk past someone drowning without throwing them a rope, even if it meant drowning himself. His phone buzzed again. Not Mrs. Chen this time. A notification from Facebook. Someone had tagged him in Mrs. Patterson's post. Marcus didn't open it. He knew what it would say. He'd seen these posts before, seen how quickly compassion became conspiracy theory, how easily helping someone became enabling them. The comments section would be full of righteous anger, of people who'd never missed a meal debating the morality of his $20 gift. They'd call him naive, irresponsible, dangerous. They'd say he was part of the problem. None of them would mention that the man had been human. The walk home took 40 minutes. Marcus used to drive, but he'd sold the car 3 months ago to cover Lily's copays. Now he walked everywhere, timing his routes around the bus schedules, calculating every journey in terms of calories burned versus calories he could afford to replace. Mrs. Chen met him at the door of their apartment building, her face creased with worry. She threw up twice. I gave her the anti-nausea medication, but I think she needs the other one, the expensive one. The expensive one. The one that cost $300 per dose. The one insurance had decided was not medically necessary despite the oncologist's insistence otherwise. I'll figure it out, Marcus said, because that's what fathers said. Thank you for staying late. Marcus. Mrs. Chen caught his arm. You look terrible. What happened? Nothing. Just a long shift. She didn't believe him. Nobody would believe him. But she released his arm and gathered her things, squeezing his shoulder once before heading down the hallway. The gesture made his throat tight. Inside the apartment, Lily was curled on the couch under Sarah's old quilt, her bald head resting on a pillow that still smelled faintly of a mother's shampoo. She opened her eyes when Marcus entered, and he saw his own exhaustion reflected back at him. Hi, Daddy. Hi, sweetheart. He sat beside her, pressing his palm to her forehead. Warm, but not dangerously so. Mrs. Chen says your stomach was bothering you. It's okay now. Lily's voice was small, careful. She'd learned not to complain, learned that every symptom cost money, learned to minimize her own suffering to protect him. 7 years old and already an expert in self-sacrifice. You don't have to be brave for me, Lily. You're always brave for me. Marcus pulled her against his chest, feeling the fragile bird-bone architecture of her shoulders. She weighed 53 pounds, 20 pounds less than she should. The cancer was eating her from the inside out, and he was supposed to sit here and watch it happen because he'd given $20 to a stranger. If you're watching this from somewhere, anywhere in the world, leave a comment and tell me where you are. Tell me you're out there. Tell me someone is bearing witness to this. Because right now, in this moment, Marcus Webb feels completely alone. He's holding his dying daughter in an apartment that smells like industrial cleaner and medical waste, and he has no idea how they're going to survive the next 24 hours. But maybe, just maybe, knowing that you're there, that you're listening, that you haven't turned away from their story, maybe that makes the isolation just a little bit easier to bear. Maybe that makes him feel a little less invisible. So comment. Please, let them know that somewhere out there, someone cares. Daddy. Lily's voice pulled him back. Why are you home early? Slow night. They didn't need me. Another lie. He was building a tower of lies, each one stacked carefully on top of the last, and eventually the whole structure would collapse and bury them both. Okay. Lily yawned, burrowing deeper into the quilt. I'm glad you're home. I missed you. I missed you too, baby. She fell asleep within minutes, her breath evening out into the shallow rhythm that had become normal. Marcus sat in the dark, watching the headlights from the street below paint patterns across the ceiling, and tried to figure out what came next. Apply for new jobs in the morning. Beg the pharmacy for a payment plan. Call Lily's oncologist and explain that they needed to space out her treatments, maybe every 3 weeks instead of every 2. Pray that the cancer was patient, that it would wait for him to get back on his feet before it took her completely. Hope that $20 had been worth it. His phone buzzed one more time. An email notification. The subject line made his stomach drop. Viral post about incident at Mel's Diner raises questions. Marcus deleted it without reading. He already knew what questions people were raising. He'd been answering them his entire life. Outside, the November wind rattled the windows. Inside, his daughter slept, dreaming of a future she might never see. And somewhere in the city, a homeless man Marcus would never see again carried $20 and the weight of a stranger's hope. The coffee stain on Marcus's uniform pants had dried to a stiff brown patch. He stayed at it, this evidence of his final shift, and wondered if kindness was supposed to hurt this much. His phone stayed silent. No calls from other diners looking to hire. No miracles arriving in his inbox. Just the steady tick of the kitchen clock, counting down the seconds until he had to figure out how to tell his daughter that her next treatment might not happen on schedule. That helping someone else might have cost her everything. 18 months ago, Marcus Webb had been a different person. Not happy. Exactly. You couldn't be happy with your wife dying by inches in the hospital bed that had replaced your dining room table. But he'd been functional. He'd been employed at the packaging plant on Route 9, making $17 an hour with benefits. He'd been a husband sitting vigil, reading Sarah mystery novels while chemotherapy dripped into her veins, pretending not to notice when she forgot the names of her favorite characters. He'd been someone who believed that if you worked hard and loved fiercely and did everything right, the universe might show you mercy. The universe had other plans. Sarah died on a Tuesday morning in March, while Marcus was at work trying to earn enough overtime to cover the copays that kept multiplying like malignant cells. The hospice nurse called at 10:23 a.m. By the time he made it home, his wife's body had already cooled, her hand still reaching toward the framed photo of Lily on the nightstand. He'd had 4 days to grieve before Lily's routine checkup revealed that her mother's cancer had been a preview, not an isolated tragedy. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Stage 3. Aggressive treatment protocol required immediately. The plant had given him 2 weeks of bereavement leave, which he'd spent learning a new vocabulary, induction therapy, consolidation phase, port placement, neutropenic precautions. He'd learned to give injections, to recognize the signs of infection, to clean up vomit without flinching. He'd learned that children's cancer was somehow more expensive than adult cancer, as if the universe charged a premium for cruelty. When he'd returned to work, his supervisor had been sympathetic, right up until Marcus started missing shifts for Lily's appointments. Right up until the sympathy curdled into frustration, then annoyance, then a careful conversation about reliability concerns and operational needs. They'd let him go on a Friday afternoon, 6 months after Sarah's death. Professional, apologetic, completely legal. The diner job had come 3 weeks later, after Marcus had exhausted his savings and maxed out the 2 credit cards he'd opened in desperation. Night shift custodian, minimum wage plus tips from the waitresses who felt sorry for him. No benefits. But Dennis had agreed to let him work around Lily's treatment schedule as long as he never, ever asked to leave mid-shift. Marcus had agreed. He would have agreed to anything. Now, sitting in the dark of his apartment at 1:34 a.m., Marcus pulled up his bank account on his phone and stared at the numbers. $43.16. Rent was $850, due yesterday. The late fee would add another $7 to $5. Lily's next treatment was in 6 days. The copay alone was $230, assuming insurance didn't find another reason to deny coverage. He opened his email. 17 new messages, all responding to Mrs. Patterson's post, which had apparently been shared 643 times. Subject, question about your charity work. Subject, disappointed in your judgment. Subject, you should be ashamed. Marcus closed his email. He knew better than to read them, but the subject lines alone told him everything he needed to know. In trying to help one person, he'd become the villain in 643 different stories. His phone rang. Unknown number. He answered anyway because unemployment made you answer every call, just in case. Mr. Webb, this is Channel 7 News. We're running a story about the incident at Mel's Diner and we'd like to get your perspective. No comment. Our viewers are very concerned about the message you're sending, especially to young people. Don't you think there's a difference between compassion and enabling destructive behavior? Marcus hung up. The phone rang again immediately. Different number. He declined the call. Then another. Then another. By 2 a.m., He'd receive 11 calls from news outlets, 3 from radio stations, and 1 from a podcast that wanted to do a deep dive into savior complex culture. He turned off his phone. In the bedroom, Lily coughed in her sleep. That wet, rattling cough that meant fluid in her lungs, that meant they needed to watch for fever, that meant another thing to worry about on a list that had stopped fitting in his head. Marcus stood at her doorway, watching her small form beneath the covers. She looked even tinier than usual, swallowed by the full-size bed they bought at a thrift store after Sarah died. They couldn't afford a proper kid's bed, but Lily had never complained. She never complained about anything. "It's too big," she'd said when they'd first set it up, running her hand over the worn comforter. "But that's okay. It means there's room for you to lay down with me when I have bad dreams." She'd had a lot of bad dreams lately. Marcus's own phone buzzed with a text. Not a news outlet this time. His landlord. "Marcus, I've been patient, but I need the rent. I have bills too. If I don't have it by Monday, I'll have to start eviction proceedings. I'm sorry. Sorry." Everyone was so sorry. He typed back, "I understand. I'll have it." Another lie for the tower. His head throbbed, a dull pressure behind his eyes that had been building for weeks. Stress headaches, the clinic doctor had said during his last free blood pressure screening at the grocery store. Reduce stress, the doctor had suggested helpfully, as if stress were a subscription Marcus could simply cancel. The apartment was too quiet. Sarah used to fill it with sound, with NPR in the morning and terrible reality TV at night, with her off-key singing while she cooked and her commentary on every news story and her laugh that sounded like wind chimes. Now it was just the hum of the refrigerator and the rattle of the old heating system and the weight of everything that needed to be said to someone who was no longer there to hear it. Marcus walked to the kitchen and opened the cupboard. 3 cans of soup, half a box of pasta, a jar of peanut butter with maybe 2 sandwiches left. Lily's appetite had been poor lately, which was a mercy he felt guilty for appreciating. Less hunger meant lower grocery bills. The food bank opened at 9 on Wednesday mornings. He could go before his job interviews, assuming anyone actually called him back. He'd applied to 17 positions in the past week: fast food, retail, warehouse work, anything that would hire someone whose most recent reference was currently telling everyone who would listen that he'd been terminated for poor judgment. His laptop sat on the kitchen counter, the screen cracked from when he dropped it 6 months ago. Marcus opened it and refreshed his email. Nothing. He checked the job sites. Nothing. He looked at the GoFundMe page his friend Tasha had set up for Lily's medical expenses, the one that had raised $347 before people stopped sharing it. Not enough. Nothing was ever enough. Marcus sat down at the table, the cheap wood grain pressing patterns into his forms. He thought about the homeless man, wondered if the $20 had bought a hot meal or a fix or simply disappeared into the void of whatever nightmare that man was living. He thought about Mrs. Patterson, probably sleeping soundly in her house in the suburbs, satisfied that she'd protected her community from misguided compassion. He thought about Lily, whose body was fighting a war she hadn't chosen and couldn't win without help he couldn't provide. The tears came suddenly, violently, shaking his shoulders with the force of 18 months of held breath. Marcus pressed his palms against his eyes and tried to cry quietly because Lily was a light sleeper and she worried when she heard him break. But sometimes breaking was the only honest thing left. When the tears finally stopped, Marcus wiped his face on his sleeve and stood up. 3:47 a.m. In 3 hours, Lily would wake up and need breakfast. In 4 hours, he needed to take her to school, assuming she felt well enough to go. In 5 hours, he needed to start making phone calls, begging for extensions, negotiating payment plans, doing the desperate mathematics of poverty. He couldn't afford to fall apart. Falling apart was a luxury reserved for people with safety nets. Marcus checked on Lily one more time. Still sleeping, her breath shallow but steady. He pulled the quilt higher, tucking it around her shoulders the way Sarah used to. Lily had her mother's nose, her mother's stubborn chin. Soon she might have a mother's fate too, unless Marcus could figure out how to rewrite the ending. He returned to the kitchen and opened his laptop again. This time he navigated to Craigslist, scrolling through the gigs section. Odd jobs, cash under the table, the kind of work that didn't ask questions or require references. Moving furniture. cleaning out garages, standing in line overnight for product releases. He'd bookmarked 6 possibilities and sent inquiry messages to all of them. The responses would probably be scams or exploitation or both, but he was past the point of being picky. His phone powered back on, immediately buzzing with notifications. More news requests, more angry messages, more people who'd never met him explaining why he was the problem with society. And then, buried among the hate, one message that made him pause. An email. No subject line. Sender. r.thornton@thorntoncapital.com. Marcus almost deleted it, assuming it was spam. But something made him click. Mr. Webb, I heard about what happened to the diner. I'd like to speak with you about a potential opportunity. Please call me at your alias convenience. Regards, Robert Thornton. A phone number. Nothing else. Marcus stayed at the screen. Thornton Capital. He'd heard that name before, seen it on the business section of the newspaper he sometimes found in the diner's break room. Venture capital, if he remembered correctly. Money people. The kind who made more in a day than Marcus would see in his lifetime. Probably a prank. Otherwise, some kind of setup, another way to humiliate him for public entertainment. But what if it wasn't? What if sometimes, in the midst of everything falling apart, someone actually reached down to help instead of stepping over you on their way to somewhere better? Marcus saved the number. He'd call in the morning, after he got Lily to school. He'd probably get a receptionist who'd never heard of any Robert Thornton, or dial tone, or a lecture about wasting important people's time. But maybe, just maybe, he'd get something else. He had to believe that, because hope, even foolish hope, was the only thing keeping him upright. The sky outside was starting to lighten, the darkness fading to gray. In 2 hours, Lily would wake up. In 2 hours, Marcus would smile and make breakfast and pretend that everything was fine because that's what parents did. But right now, in the last quiet moments before the performance began again, he let himself imagine a different story. One where the $20 mattered. Where helping someone created ripples instead of wreckage. Where doing the right thing didn't mean watching your daughter die. One where the universe showed mercy, just this once. The apartment was still too quiet. The refrigerator still hummed. The heating system still rattled. But somewhere in Marcus's chest, something small and stubborn refused to give up. Not yet. Not while Lily still needed him. Not while there was still a chance, however slim, that the Tower of Lies might hold just a little bit longer. Outside, the city woke up to another day. Inside, Marcus Webb sat at his kitchen table and tried to remember how to hope. Robert Thornton hadn't slept well in 2 years, 4 months, and 16 days. Not since the phone call that shattered his life into a before and after so distinct they might as well have belonged to different people. His son, Ethan, had been 23 years old. Brilliant, troubled, fighting demons that Robert had been too busy to recognize. When the police found his body in that motel room, the needle still in his arm, they'd catalogued the scene with professional detachment. One deceased male. Multiple substances. No signs of foul play. No signs that anyone had cared enough to stop him. Robert had built an empire. Thornton Capital managed $4 billion in assets. He had homes in 3 cities, a car collection worth more than most people's mortgages, and a reputation for ruthlessness that made grown men nervous in boardrooms. He could move markets with a phone call, but he couldn't save his own son. Now, at 4:17 a.m., Robert sat in his home office reviewing security footage from a diner across town, watching a janitor give away $20 to a homeless man. He'd been watching it for 3 hours, frozen at the moment when Marcus Webb pressed the money into that man's trembling hand. The gesture was so casual, so automatic, like breathing or blinking. This wasn't performance. This was reflex. This was a person who saw someone suffering and simply couldn't walk away. Robert's assistant had flagged the viral post yesterday afternoon. This might be relevant to your search, sir. The man in question was terminated for his actions. There's significant public backlash. The search. Robert had been conducting it for 18 months, ever since he'd found Ethan's journal and read the entry dated 3 days before his death. A guy on the street asked me for money today. I walked past him. Everyone walks past them. I wanted to help, but I was scared, and I told myself I'd do it tomorrow. But what if there is no tomorrow? What if the thing that saves someone is the thing you're too afraid or too busy or too important to do? Dad's always saying time is money. Maybe kindness is too. Maybe I've been bankrupt my whole life and just didn't know it. Robert had read those words 50, 100, 1,000 times. Each time they cut deeper. He tried to find the man Ethan had mentioned, the one his son had walked past. He'd hired investigators, reviewed security footage from the area where Ethan had been staying, interviewed people who might have seen something. Nothing. But he'd kept looking, kept watching for moments like the one in this footage. Moments when someone chose differently than his son had. Moments when kindness cost something real. Marcus Webb had lost his job, was facing eviction, had a sick daughter and no prospects and every reason to hold on to that $20. He'd given it away anyway. Robert pulled up the background check his security team had compiled. Marcus Webb, age 38. Wife deceased from breast cancer 27 months ago. Daughter Lily Webb, age 7. Currently in treatment for acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Previous employment at Riverside Packaging. Terminated due to attendance issues related to family medical leave. Current employment status. Unemployed as of yesterday. Financial status. Catastrophic. Medical debt. Crushing. Prognosis without intervention. Grim. Robert opened another file. This one contained the social media firestorm surrounding Marcus's termination. 643 shares. Hundreds of comments. People who'd never missed a meal debating whether Marcus had enabled addiction or demonstrated compassion. He found Mrs. Patterson's original post, read through her carefully crafted outrage. This man's irresponsible behavior puts us all at risk. What if that homeless person became violent? What if he came back asking for more? We have to think about the safety of our community. Then Robert found a response from someone named Tasha Mills. Marcus Webb is the best person I know. His wife just died. His daughter has cancer. He gave away his last $20 because that's who he is. But sure, let's destroy his life over it. That'll definitely make the world a better place. 57 people had liked Mrs. Patterson's post. 11 had liked Tasha's response. Robert closed his laptop and walked to the window. His penthouse overlooked the city, the lights stretching out like a circuit board, each point of brightness representing lives he'd never know. Somewhere out there, Marcus Webb was probably awake, staring at his own ceiling, doing the mathematics of impossible choices. Robert knew something about impossible choices. He'd made one 2 years ago when Ethan had called from rehab, asking for help. Robert had been in Tokyo, closing a deal worth $40 million. He'd told his son they'd talk when he got back. Ethan had checked himself out 3 days later. He'd been dead within a week. $40 million. His son's life. Time was money, just like Robert had always said. He'd chosen poorly, but maybe he could help someone else choose differently. Robert picked up his phone and dialed his assistant. She answered on the first ring despite the hour. Find out everything about Marcus Webb's daughter's medical situation. Contact her oncologist. I want to know exactly what treatment she needs, what it costs, and what happens if she doesn't get it. Yes, sir. And the father. Send him a message. Tell him I want to meet. What should I say the meeting is regarding? Robert looked back at the frozen image on his laptop screen. Marcus Webb, handing away hope. Tell him it's about a job opportunity. See if he responds. And if he doesn't, then we go to him. He hung up and returned to the window. The city was starting to wake up, the darkness fading at the edges. In a few hours, Marcus Webb would receive his message. In a few hours, Robert would find out if the gesture in that security footage was real or performance. If Marcus was truly the kind of person who gave when it cost everything. Robert suspected he already knew the answer. The question was whether he could do anything about it before it was too late. Across town, Marcus Webb's alarm went off at 6 a.m. He'd managed 90 minutes of sleep, his dreams populated by collections agencies and cancer cells, and his daughter's voice asking questions he couldn't answer. Lily was already awake, sitting up in bed with her coloring book open on her lap. She looked up when he appeared in the doorway, and the smile she gave him was so bright, so determinedly cheerful, that Marcus had to turn away to hide his face. Morning, Daddy. I feel better today. I think I can go to school. She couldn't go to school. Her immune system was compromised, and there was a flu outbreak in her classroom. But school meant 7 hours when Marcus could job hunt without worrying that she was alone and scared. School meant Lily could pretend to be normal for a few hours, could forget about the port in her chest and the poison running through her veins. Okay, sweetheart, let's get you some breakfast. They went through the morning routine. Oatmeal with the last of the brown sugar. Medication crushed into applesauce. Temperature check. 99.1. Just under the threshold that would require an immediate call to the oncologist. Lily put on her pink hat, the one that covered her bald head, and gathered her backpack. Ready? Marcus asked. Ready. The walk to school took 20 minutes. Lily held his hand the whole way, her fingers tiny and cold in his. She chatted about her friend Emma's birthday party next week, carefully not mentioning that she hadn't been invited because Emma's mother didn't want a sick kid around. She talked about the book they were reading in class, about how the main character reminded her of Mommy because she was brave even when she was scared. Was Mommy scared? Lily asked suddenly. When she was sick. Marcus swallowed hard. Yes, but she loved you so much that it made her braver than the scared parts. Am I supposed to be brave? You're already the bravest person I know. They reached the school. Marcus walked Lily to her classroom, ignoring the looks from other parents, the whispers that followed him down the hallway. Everyone knew. Mrs. Patterson had made sure everyone knew. He kissed Lily's forehead. I'll pick you up at 3. Okay, Daddy. Yeah, baby. Even if we don't have a lot of money, we're still okay, right? Because we have each other. Marcus's throat closed. He managed to nod, to smile, to ruffle her pink hat before walking away before she could see him fall apart. In the parking lot, he checked his phone. The email from Robert Thornton was still there, the phone number waiting. Marcus stayed at it for a long moment, weighing hope against experience, possibility against probability. Then he dialed. A woman answered. Thornton Capital. How may I direct your call? This is Marcus Webb. I received an email about a job opportunity. Yes, Mr. Webb. Mr. Thornton is expecting your call. Please hold. Classical music filled the silence. Marcus leaned against someone's car and tried to breathe. Then a man's voice, smooth and assured. Mr. Webb, thank you for calling. I'll get right to the point. I saw what happened at the diner. I'd like to discuss your situation in person. Are you available today? I'm available every day. I don't have a job anymore. I'm aware. Can you be at my office at noon? Marcus checked the time. 5 hours. What's the address? Robert gave it to him. Downtown. The expensive part. Marcus would have to take 2 buses. I'll be there. Good. And Mr. Webb? Bring documentation of your daughter's medical expenses. I'll explain when you arrive. The line went dead. Marcus stood in the parking lot, his phone pressed against his ear, trying to understand what had just happened. A billionaire had invited him to a meeting, had specifically mentioned Lily's medical expenses, had said he'd explain. It made no sense. Nothing about this made sense. But Marcus had learned long ago that when life offered you a rope, you grabbed it first and asked questions later, even if the rope might be attached to an anchor. He spent the next 4 hours preparing. He showered with the last of the hot water. He put on his only interview outfit, the dress shirt that was frayed at the collar and the slacks that were shiny at the knees. He gathered every medical bill, every insurance denial, every collection notice into a manila folder that was shamefully thick. Then he took 2 buses downtown and stood outside the gleaming tower that housed Thornton Capital, staring at his reflection in the glass, and wondered if he was about to be saved or humiliated. Either way, he was out of options. Marcus walked through the revolving door and into whatever came next. The lobby smelled like money and leather and the kind of confidence that came from never wondering if you could afford your next meal. Marcus approached the reception desk, his folder clutched against his chest like armor. Marcus Webb, I have an appointment with Mr. Thornton. The receptionist's smile was professional, neutral. Of course. Mr. Thornton is on the 42nd floor. The elevator to your right. In the elevator, Marcus caught sight of himself in the mirrored walls. He looked exhausted, desperate, exactly like what he was. A drowning man reaching for anything that floated. The doors opened. Another receptionist, this one with kinder eyes. "Mr. Webb, right this way." She led him down a hallway lined with art that probably cost more than Lily's entire treatment protocol. Through glass walls, Marcus could see conference rooms full of people in expensive suits, making decisions that moved invisible rivers of money from one place to another. Then they reached a corner office, and Marcus saw him. Robert Thornton stood at the window, silhouetted against the city below. He turned when Marcus entered, and for a moment, neither man spoke. Robert saw the frayed collar first, then the folder, held like a shield, then the eyes, which held the particular exhaustion of someone who'd been drowning for so long they'd forgotten what air tasted like. Marcus saw wealth beyond comprehension, power beyond imagining, and something else, something in the careful way Robert studied him, that looked almost like grief. "Mr. Webb," Robert said finally, "thank you for coming. Please, sit down. We have a lot to discuss." Marcus sat today. He placed a folder on the desk between them. And in that moment, in that impossible office suspended 42 floors above a city that had stopped believing in miracles, two men stared at each other across a vast distance that had nothing to do with space and everything to do with chance. One of them had lost everything. One of them had everything and had still lost the only thing that mattered. Between them sat a manila folder full of medical bills and a question neither had voiced yet. Could the wreckage of one man's life somehow salvage meaning from another's? Robert reached for the folder. "Tell me about your daughter." And Marcus, who'd been holding everything together through force of will and desperation, finally let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, he didn't have to do this alone. Robert opened the folder and began to read. Each page was a record of impossible choices: treatment denied, copays unpaid, payment plans defaulted. He read about Lily's diagnosis, her prognosis, the experimental treatment her insurance had refused to cover because it wasn't standard protocol. He read about Sarah's death, the medical debt from her cancer bleeding directly into her daughter's, a hereditary catastrophe measured in denied claims and outstanding balances. Marcus sat across from him, his hands folded on his lap, waiting. There was no pleading in his posture, no performance. Just the quiet dignity of someone who'd already begged so many times he'd worn through to something harder underneath. "Your daughter needs a bone marrow transplant," Robert said finally. "Yes. Her oncologist recommended it 3 months ago. Insurance denied it. We appealed. They denied again. What happens without it?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "The leukemia will come back. It always comes back. The chemo buys time, but not enough. Without the transplant, she has maybe a year, maybe less. And with it, 80% 5U survival rate. She could grow up, go to college, have a life." Robert closed the folder. "How much?" $350,000. Plus hospital stays, medications, follow-up care. Maybe $500,000 total. The numbers sat between them, massive and insurmountable. To Marcus, it might as well have been $1 trillion. To Robert, it was less than he'd spent on his car collection. "I'm going to pay for it," Robert said. "All of it. And I'm going to make sure you have housing, transportation, and income while she recovers." Marcus stared at him. The words didn't seem to register at first, bouncing off some defensive wall built from months of disappointment. "What?" "Your daughter's treatment. Your rent. Your expenses. I'm going to cover them." "Why?" It was the right question. Robert appreciated that Marcus asked it, that he didn't simply accept without understanding. "My son died 2 years ago." Robert's voice was steady, practiced. He'd said these words before, to therapists and grief counselors in the empty spaces where Ethan used to be. "Overdose. He'd been struggling for years, and I was too busy building this empire to notice. 3 days before he died, he saw someone on the street who needed help. He walked past them. He wrote in his journal that he wished he'd stopped, but he was scared, and he told himself he'd do it tomorrow." Robert paused, looking out the window at the city below. "There was no tomorrow for my son. But I've been searching for that person he walked past, trying to find a way to honor what Ethan wished he'd done. Yesterday, my assistant showed me footage of you at the diner. You didn't walk past. You gave away your last $20, and it cost you your job. You chose kindness when it cost you everything, And I want to help you because my son never got the chance to. Marcus was silent for a long moment. I'm not a charity case. No, you're not. You're exactly the kind of person my son wanted to be. I'm nobody. I'm a janitor who couldn't keep his mouth shut. You're a father who's fighting for his daughter with everything you have. That's not nobody. Marcus's eyes were wet now, his careful composure cracking. If you're serious about this, if you're really going to help us, I need you to understand something. Lily is everything. Everything. If this is some kind of experiment or publicity stunt, a way to make yourself feel better, if you're going to start this and then change your mind when things get complicated, I'd rather you walk away now. Because she's already lost her mother, and she can't lose hope too. I'm not going to walk away. How do I know that? Robert pulled out his phone and made a call. Dr. Singh, Robert Thornton, I'm sitting with Marcus Webb, father of Lily Webb, one of your patients. I want you to schedule her for the bone marrow transplant. Yes, immediately. I'll wire the full amount today. No, this isn't a pledge, it's a commitment. Send the contracts to my attorney. He hung up and looked at Marcus. Your daughter's oncologist will call you within the hour. The transplant is scheduled. This is happening. Marcus made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. He pressed his hands against his face, shoulders shaking. Robert waited. He'd learned in the past 2 years that some moments required silence, that witnessing someone's breaking point was sometimes the most respectful thing you could do. When Marcus finally looked up, his face was blotchy and wet. I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to thank me. You need to take care of your daughter. That's all I ask. What about a job? You mentioned income. Robert had thought about this carefully. I want to offer you a position overseeing a new foundation I'm establishing, the Ethan Thornton Memorial Fund. It will provide emergency assistance to families facing medical crises, people who fall through the cracks of our healthcare system. You'd work with me to identify recipients, manage disbursements, and advocate for policy changes. Salary is $90,000 a year to start, full benefits, flexible hours for Lily's care. Marcus shook his head slowly. I don't have any experience with that kind of work. You have the only experience that matters. You've lived it. You know what families need because you've needed it yourself. The rest we can teach you. $90,000. Plus housing. There's an apartment building I own about 2 miles from the hospital where Lily will have her treatment. 2 bedrooms, accessible for her wheelchair if she needs one during recovery. You'll move in next week. Marcus was staring at him like he'd started speaking a different language. This doesn't make sense. People don't just do this. I know, but I'm doing it anyway. And in that moment, watching Marcus Webb struggle to accept that his nightmare might actually be ending, Robert felt something shift in his chest. Not healing. Exactly. The wound Ethan left was too deep for that. But maybe the beginning of purpose. Maybe a way to make his son's death mean something beyond loss. His phone rang. His sister, Catherine. Robert declined the call. It rang again immediately. Excuse me, he said to Marcus, stepping out of the office. Catherine's voice was sharp with alarm. Robert, what the hell are you doing? I'm helping someone. How did you even know? Your assistant called me. She's worried you're making another impulsive decision. Robert, you can't just throw money at random people because you feel guilty about Ethan. It's not random. And this isn't about guilt. Then what is it about? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're trying to save a stranger because you couldn't save your son. The words hit harder than they should have. Maybe that's exactly what I'm doing. Maybe that's the only thing that makes sense anymore. Robert. Catherine's voice softened. I know you're hurting. We're all hurting. But this man, Marcus Webb, he could be anyone. He could be taking advantage of you. He's not. How do you know? Because I watched him give away his last $20 to a homeless man and lose his job for it. Because he's fighting to keep his daughter alive with absolutely nothing to fight with. Because when I offered to help, his first instinct was to protect her, not to take advantage of me. Catherine was quiet for a moment. The board won't like this. The board doesn't get a vote. It's my money. It's the company's reputation. They'll say you're being reckless. They'll question your judgment. Let them. Robert, I'm trying to help you. Then trust me. This is the first thing that's felt right since Ethan died. Don't take it away from me. He could hear Catherine breathing on the other end of the line, calculating, weighing. Finally, she sighed. Fine, but I'm watching this situation closely. If anything seems off, if this man is anything other than what you think he is, I'm pulling the plug. Fair enough. Robert hung up and returned to his office. Marcus was still sitting exactly where he'd left him, staring at his hands like they belonged to someone else. Everything okay? Marcus asked. Yes, just my sister expressing concern. She thinks you're crazy. She thinks I'm impulsive. She's not entirely wrong. Marcus smiled slightly. For what it's worth, this is the best impulsive decision anyone's ever made for me. Robert handed him a business card. My personal cell phone number is on there. Day or night, if you or Lily need anything, you call. Understood. Understood. My assistant will be in touch about the apartment and the foundation position. Dr. Singh will call about Lily's treatment schedule. Things are going to move fast now. Are you ready for that? Marcus stood, tucking the card carefully into his wallet. Mr. Thornton, I've been drowning for 2 years. Fast sounds perfect. They shook hands. Marcus's grip was firm despite the exhaustion, despite everything. Thank you, Marcus said quietly. I know you said I don't need to, but I'm going to say it anyway. Thank you. Take care of your daughter. That's all the thanks I need. Marcus left, the folder of medical bills now obsolete in his hands. Robert watched him walk down the hallway toward the elevator, watched him pause to press his palm against the glass wall as if steadying himself against the sudden absence of weight he'd been carrying. Then Marcus was gone, and Robert was alone in his office again, surrounded by the artifacts of success that had never managed to feel like enough. His phone buzzed. A text from Catherine, I hope you know what you're doing. Robert typed back, I don't, but I'm doing it anyway. Because maybe that's what redemption looked like. Not certainty, but action. Not perfection, but trying. Not bringing Ethan back, but honoring what his son had wanted to become. Outside his window, the city continued its endless motion. Somewhere in it, Marcus Webb was probably calling his daughter's school, voice shaking, trying to explain that everything had just changed. Somewhere in it, a 7-year-old girl was about to learn that sometimes miracles actually happened. And somewhere in it, Robert Thornton sat in his corner office and allowed himself to feel something he hadn't felt in 2 years, 4 months, and 17 days. Hope. The transplant was scheduled for 2 weeks out. 2 weeks for Lily to complete her pre-procedure preparations, for Marcus to move them into the new apartment, for the story to leak in ways Robert should have anticipated but somehow hadn't. Mrs. Patterson found out first, of course. She always did. Her follow-up post went viral faster than the original. Update. The janitor hero who gave money to a drug addict has now been rewarded by a billionaire with a luxury apartment, high-paying job, and free medical care for his daughter. So let me get this straight. We're teaching people that irresponsible behavior gets you rescued. What message does this send? That if you make bad choices, rich people will bail you out? This is exactly what's wrong with society. Real Americans work hard and don't expect handouts. This man should be ashamed, and so should Robert Thornton. The post had been shared 2,000 times within 12 hours. Marcus found out when a reporter ambushed him outside Lily's school. Mr. Webb, is it true you've accepted $500,000 from Robert Thornton? Do you think you deserve this money more than other families struggling with medical bills? Marcus had pushed past her, Lily's hand gripped tight in his heart racing. Inside the car, his 7-year-old daughter had looked up at him with 2 old eyes. Daddy, why was that lady yelling at you? She was just confused, sweetheart. But Lily wasn't fooled. She'd been reading the fear in his face for 2 years. Did we do something wrong? No, we didn't do anything wrong. Robert's phone rang at 6 p.m. His attorney, Michael Chen, sounded exhausted. We need to talk. The board wants a meeting. Let them meet. Robert, they're threatening a vote of no confidence. They're saying your judgment is impaired, that you're making decisions based on emotion rather than fiduciary responsibility. This is my personal money. The company isn't involved. The company's reputation is involved. You're the face of Thornton Capital. Everything you do reflects on the firm. There are shareholders demanding answers, limited partners asking questions. This isn't going away. Robert closed his eyes. What do they want? They want you to issue a statement distancing yourself from Marcus Webb. They want you to cancel the arrangement and donate the money to an established charity instead. Something above board, something that doesn't look like impulse. No, Robert. I said no. Schedule the board meeting. I'll address their concerns myself. The meeting took place 3 days later in the main conference room, with 16 board members arranged around the table like a tribunal. Catherine sat at the far end, her expression carefully neutral. Richard Davenport, the senior board member, led the prosecution. Robert, we're all sympathetic to your desire to honor your son's memory. But this situation with Marcus Webb has become a liability. The negative press is affecting our relationships with clients. We've had 3 institutional investors express concern about your decision-making capacity. My decision-making capacity is fine. Is it? Because from where we sit, this looks like a man having a breakdown and throwing money at a stranger in an attempt to feel better about a personal tragedy. Robert kept his voice level. Marcus Webb is not a stranger. He's a single father whose wife died of cancer, whose daughter is fighting the same disease, who lost his job because he showed compassion to someone in need. He's exactly the kind of person we should be helping. Another board member, Julia Preston, leaned forward. But why him specifically? There are thousands of families in similar situations. Why single out this one man? What makes him special besides a viral video? What makes him special is that he did the right thing when it cost him everything. And instead of being celebrated for it, he was punished. That's not a world I want to live in. Noble sentiment, Richard said dryly. But we're not here to change the world. We're here to manage $4 billion in assets and maintain the trust of our investors. Your personal crusades are not our concern. Then perhaps you need a new CEO. The room went silent. Catherine spoke for the first time. Robert, don't be dramatic. I'm not being dramatic. I'm being clear. If this board believes that honoring my son's memory by helping someone in need is a liability rather than an asset, then we have fundamentally different values. And I don't want to lead a company that doesn't share mine. Richard's expression hardened. Are you threatening to resign? I'm stating a fact. My son died because I was too busy chasing money to notice he was suffering. I'm not going to dishonor his memory by pretending that profit matters more than people. If you can't accept that, then yes, you should find a new CEO. Julia's voice was gentler now. No one wants that, Robert. We're just asking you to handle this more carefully. Issue a statement explaining your reasoning. Make it clear this is a one-time situation, not a pattern. Give us something to tell the investors. Robert considered this. I'll issue a statement. But I'm not canceling the arrangement with Marcus Webb. And I'm not apologizing for helping him. What will the statement say? The truth. That my son wanted to help people and didn't get the chance. That Marcus Webb represents the kind of compassion I wish my son had been able to show. That if honoring Ethan's memory cost me professional relationships, I consider that a fair trade. Richard shook his head. That's not going to satisfy anyone. I don't care. I'm not in the business of satisfying people anymore. I'm in the business of doing what's right. The board meeting ended without resolution, the members filing out with expressions ranging from concern to outright hostility. Catherine lingered behind. You're gambling your career on this, she said quietly. I'm gambling that my career still has meaning. There's a difference. What if you're wrong about him? What if Marcus Webb isn't who you think he is? Then I'll deal with that. But I don't think I'm wrong. Catherine studied him for a long moment. You've changed since Ethan died. Yes. I'm not sure if it's a good change or a bad one. Neither am I. But it's the only change that feels real. She nodded slowly, then left. Robert stood alone in the conference room, looking out at the city below, and wondered if he was making the biggest mistake of his life or the first truly meaningful decision he'd made in years. His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Dr. Singh moved up the transplant. They found a match. Lily goes in tomorrow. I don't know how to thank you for this chance. Robert typed back. You don't need to thank me. Just let me know if you need anything. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then reappeared. Actually, there is something. Could you be there? For the transplant. I don't want to be alone for this. And I don't have anyone else. Robert stated the message. He'd given Marcus money, housing, employment. But this was different. This was showing up. This was being present in the messy, terrifying, deeply human moment when everything hung in the balance. This was what Ethan had wanted. Not just to help from a distance, but to be there, to witness, to care. I'll be there, Robert typed. What time? 6 a.m. St. Mary's Hospital. I'll see you then. Robert left the office early for the first time in years. At home, he poured a glass of whiskey and sat in Ethan's old room, which he'd left untouched since his son's death. The journal was still on the nightstand. Robert opened it to the last entry. Maybe kindness is money too. Maybe I've been bankrupt my whole life and just didn't know it. I'm trying to fix that, son, Robert said aloud to the empty room. I hope you can see that I'm trying. The room offered no answer, but somehow, in the silence, Robert felt something shift. Not peace exactly, but purpose, direction, a sense that maybe, just maybe, the wreckage of his life with Ethan could be rebuilt into something that honored what his son had wanted to become. At 5:30 a.m. the next morning, Robert arrived at St. Mary's Hospital. Marcus was already there, pacing in the waiting room, his face gray with exhaustion and terror. She's in pre-op, Marcus said when he saw Robert. They said the procedure takes 6 to 8 hours. Then we wait. If her body accepts the transplant, if there are no complications, if everything goes right, she has a chance. If not, his voice broke. Robert guided him to a chair. She's going to make it. You can't know that. You're right, but I can't believe it. And right now, that's what she needs from us. Belief. They sat together in the waiting room as dawn broke over the city. Nurses moved through the halls with quiet efficiency. Other families huddled in their own private terrors, waiting for news that would redefine their lives. At 7:15, Dr. Singh emerged. She's in surgery. Everything's proceeding normally. I'll update you in a few hours. Marcus nodded, unable to speak. The hours crawled past. Robert bought coffee that neither of them drank. Marcus told stories about Lily, about Sarah, about the life they'd had before cancer rewrote everything. Robert listened, bearing witness to a grief that mirrored his own. At noon, Dr. Singh returned. The transplant is complete. Now we wait for engraftment. The next 48 hours are critical. Can I see her? Not yet, but soon. She's strong, Marcus. She's fighting. She's always fighting. They stayed at the hospital for 2 days straight. Robert had his assistant bring changes of clothes, food, everything they needed to maintain vigil. Catherine called twice to tell him the board had scheduled another meeting. He ignored both calls. On the third day, Dr. Singh came to them with a smile. The transplant is taking. Her body is accepting the new marrow. It's early, but the signs are very good. Marcus made a sound like all the air leaving his lungs at once. She's going to make it. Barring complications, yes, she's going to make it. This time when Marcus cried, it was from relief so profound it looked like pain. Robert sat beside him, one hand on his shoulder, and remembered what hope felt like when it wasn't just a concept but a living, breathing truth. 6 months later, Robert stood in a conference room very different from the one where the board had questioned his judgment. This room was in a community center in the neighborhood where Marcus had once lived, and it was filled with people whose faces bore the particular exhaustion of poverty and illness and impossible choices. Marcus stood at the front, no longer hollow-eyed and desperate. He'd gained weight. Color had returned to his face. He looked like someone who'd learned to breathe again. Thank you all for coming, Marcus said. I know some of you are wondering why you're here, what the Ethan Thornton Memorial Fund is, and whether this is legitimate or just another scam. I understand that skepticism. 6 months ago, I was exactly where you are now. My daughter was dying. I'd lost my job. I'd given up hope. He paused, looking at Robert, who stood at the back of the room. And then someone decided that my family mattered. That our story deserved a different ending. The Ethan Thornton Memorial Fund exists to do for you what was done for me. Provide emergency assistance for families facing medical crises. We cover treatment costs, housing, transportation, whatever you need to keep fighting. We're not a charity that makes you beg or prove you're worthy. We're a resource that recognizes your humanity and responds to it. A woman in the front row raised her hand. Why? What's the catch? Marcus smiled. No catch. Just a belief that people who are drowning deserve a rope, not a lecture about swimming lessons. Over the next hour, Marcus and Robert outlined the fund's mission. They showed evidence of families already helped, 12 so far, with plans to scale to hundreds. They explained the application process, the response timeline, the commitment to dignity and speed. When the presentation ended, people lined up to ask questions, to share their own stories, to grasp at the possibility that maybe, just maybe, help was real. One man approached Robert directly. My wife has miss. We're about to lose our house. Can you really help? Yes, Robert said. Fill out the application. We'll have an answer within 48 hours. The man's eyes filled. Why are you doing this? Because my son wanted to help people and ran out of time. This is how I make sure his kindness didn't die with him. Afterward, Marcus and Robert stood outside the community center, watching people disperse into the evening. Do you think Ethan would be proud? Marcus asked quietly. I think he'd be amazed that something good came from his death. I think he'd tell me I'm doing it wrong, that I'm too focused on systems and not enough on individuals. But yes, I think he'd be proud. Lily wants to meet him. I mean, she wants to visit his grave, bring him flowers. She says is the reason she's alive, and she wants to say thank you. Robert's throat tightened. I'd like that. They stood in silence for a moment, two men bound by loss and redemption and the thin thread of hope that sometimes, against all odds, kindness mattered. You know what the strangest part is? Marcus said. 6 months ago, I gave away $20 and lost everything. Now I have more than I ever imagined possible. All because I tried to help someone I'll probably never see again. Maybe that's the point. Maybe we're not supposed to see the results. Maybe we're just supposed to do the right thing and trust that it ripples out in ways we can't predict. You sound like a philosopher. I sound like someone who's learned that money can't buy meaning, but meaning might be worth more than money. Marcus laughed, the sound full and genuine. Definitely a philosopher. They parted ways, Marcus heading home to Lily, Robert heading back to his office to review the next round of applications. The work was endless, overwhelming, impossible to do perfectly. But it was the first thing that had felt right in 2 years, 4 months, and now nearly 7 days. In his office, Robert pulled up a photo on his computer. Ethan, at 20, before the drugs took hold. His son was laughing at something off camera, his whole face bright with the kind of joy Robert had forgotten existed. I'm trying, son, Robert said to the image. I don't know if I'm doing it right, but I'm trying. The office was quiet. The city lights sparkled below, and somewhere in that vast darkness, families were drowning, reaching for ropes, hoping someone would notice they were human and worth saving. Robert opened the next application, then the next, then the next. Because if Ethan had taught him anything, it was that tomorrow wasn't guaranteed. That the only moment you had to help someone was now. That kindness delayed was kindness denied. And because Marcus Webb had reminded him that sometimes the smallest gesture, a $20 bill pressed into a stranger's hand, could ripple out in ways that changed everything. Not just for the person receiving help, but for the person giving it. Not just for one family, but for hundreds. Not just for a moment, but forever. If you've made it to the end of this story, if you've watched Marcus and Lily fight for survival, if you've seen Robert try to honor his son's memory by building something meaningful from grief, then maybe you understand why this matters. Maybe you've been Marcus, drowning and desperate. Maybe you've been Robert, searching for purpose in the wreckage. Maybe you've been the person walking past someone who needs help, telling yourself you'll stop tomorrow. This story exists because kindness ripples outward in ways we can't always see. Because sometimes the smallest gesture becomes the thing that saves someone, because we're all just trying to survive in a world that can be cruel and beautiful in equal measure. If this story moved you, if it made you think or feel or reconsider what matters, then take a moment to like this video, leave a comment about your own experiences with unexpected kindness, Subscribe to this channel for more stories that remind us of our shared humanity. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, and check the description for information about real organizations doing this work. Because every story we share, every hand we extend, every moment we choose connection over indifference, we're honoring the Ethan Thorntons and the Marcus Webbs and all the people trying to make the world a little less heavy for someone else. 3 months after the community center presentation, Lily Webb stood in a cemetery holding a bouquet of sunflowers. Her hair had started growing back, soft and fuzzy like duckling down. She wore a yellow dress her father had bought her when she got her 6-month clean scan, and she held Robert Thornton's hand like he was family, because in all the ways that mattered, he was. "Is this him?" she asked, looking at Ethan's headstone. "Yes," Robert said. "This is my son." Lily knelt carefully, placing the sunflowers against the granite. "Hi, Ethan. My name is Lily. I'm alive because your dad helped my dad. And your dad helped my dad because you wanted to help people but you couldn't. So I wanted to say thank you. And I wanted to tell you that I'm going to help people too when I grow up. I'm going to be a doctor, and I'm going to remember that scared people need someone to be kind, not someone to judge them." She stood up, brushing dirt from her knees. "Also, your dad is really nice, but he works too much. You should tell him to take breaks." Robert laughed, the sound surprising him. "I'll try to remember that." Marcus stood a few feet away, giving them space. His eyes were wet, but he was smiling. In his pocket was a job offer he'd received that morning, a promotion within the foundation to Director of Family Services. The salary was enough to save for Lily's college fund. Enough to stop living in survival mode and start living in hope. Enough to finally breathe. Lily took Robert's hand again as they walked back to the car. "Do you think he can see us from heaven?" "I don't know," Robert said honestly. "But I'd like to think so. I think he can. I think he's glad you're not sad all the time anymore." "I'm still sad sometimes." "That's okay. Daddy's still sad about Mommy. But he's happy too. People can be both." Out of the mouths of 7-year-olds, Robert thought. "You're very wise, Lily." "I know," she said seriously. "It's because I almost died. It makes you wise." They drove back to the city together, the three of them, this found family built from tragedy and $20 and the stubborn insistence that people mattered more than money. They stopped for ice cream because Lily's doctor had cleared her for dairy. They sat outside in the September sunshine, watching people pass by, each one carrying invisible stories of loss and hope and the daily work of survival. Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from Tasha. "Saw your interview on the news. I'm so proud of you. Call me when you can." He'd done the interview 2 days ago, talking about the fund, about Lily's recovery, about the importance of responding to crisis with compassion instead of judgment. The comments section had been predictably mixed. Some people celebrated him. Others still thought he was a fraud, that Robert was being manipulated, that the whole thing was an elaborate scam. Marcus had learned to let it go. You couldn't control what people thought. You could only control what you did with the opportunities you were given. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Robert asked, just thinking about how strange life is. 6 months ago, I was standing in a diner, being fired for giving away $20. Now I'm sitting here eating ice cream with my healthy daughter and a billionaire who's become one of my best friends. It doesn't feel real. "It's real," Robert said. "Maybe improbable, but real." "Do you ever regret it? The money, the time, dealing with the board's criticism?" "Never. Not once. This is the first thing I've done in years that feels like it matters." Lily licked her cone thoughtfully. "Daddy, can we help someone today? Like you helped that man at the diner." "What did you have in mind?" She pointed across the street to a woman sitting on a bench, her belongings in garbage bags beside her. "She looks cold. Can we buy her a jacket?" Marcus looked at Robert. Robert nodded. They crossed the street together. The woman looked up warily as they approached, her eyes holding the particular exhaustion of someone who'd learned to expect the worst from strangers. "Hi," Lily said. "My name is Lily. Are you cold?" The woman blinked, surprised by the directness. "A little. We want to buy you a jacket. What size do you wear?" I don't know. Medium, maybe." "We'll be right back." They went to the store on the corner, bought a warm jacket, a hat, gloves, and a $50 gift card for the diner next door. When they returned, the woman was still sitting on the bench, as if she hadn't quite believed they would come back. Lily handed her the bag. Hey, and this is for food. The diner makes really good soup. The woman's hand shook as she accepted the gifts. Why? Because you needed help, and we could give it, Lily said simply. That's what people are supposed to do. They left her there, holding the bag like it contained something precious. As they walked away, Marcus heard the woman crying, those specific sobs that came from kindness unexpected and overwhelming. That felt good, Lily announced. Can we do it again? Yes, Marcus said. Yes, we can. And they did. Over the months and years that followed, as Lily grew stronger and the foundation expanded and the work of helping people became the organizing principle of their lives, they kept doing it. Small gestures and large ones. $20 bills and college scholarships. Jackets and housing and medical care and witness. Because Marcus Webb had learned that the $20 he gave away in a diner hadn't been lost. It had been invested in a future he couldn't have imagined, in connections he couldn't have predicted, in ripples that spread farther than he could see. And Robert Thornton had learned that his son's death could mean something beyond grief. That Ethan's wish to help people could live on in the hands of strangers who chose kindness when it cost them everything. They learned together that sometimes the thing you lose becomes the thing that saves you. That sometimes the worst moment of your life is the doorway to something better. That sometimes, against all logic and expectation and cynicism, people cared about each other in ways that mattered. And that $20, given to a stranger on a cold November day, could change the entire trajectory of multiple lives. Not because money was magic, but because compassion was. The last time Marcus visited Ethan's grave, it was 2 years after Lily's transplant. She was 9 years old now, healthy and strong and full of the particular fierceness that came from surviving something that should have killed her. She'd brought her own flowers this time, and she'd written Ethan a letter that she read aloud in the cemetery's quiet. Dear Ethan, I'm in 4th grade now. My hair grew back, but it's curly now, which is weird but okay. Daddy says I get the curly hair from Mom, who I don't remember very much except that she smelled like vanilla and she used to sing me songs in Spanish. I wish you could have met my mom. I think you would have liked her. Your dad says you were really smart and really funny and that you wanted to help people. I want to help people too. Yesterday I gave my lunch to a kid at school who didn't have one, and the teacher got mad at me because I was supposed to ask permission first. But Daddy said I did the right thing, and that's what matters. Rules are important, but people are more important. That's what your dad taught my dad, and what my dad is teaching me. So thank you for wanting to help people even though you didn't get to. Thank you for having a dad who turned your wish into something real. And thank you for being the reason I'm alive. I'm going to make it count. I promise. Love, Lily. She folded the letter and tucked it under a rock beside the flowers. Then she stood and took Marcus's hand. Ready to go home? Marcus asked. Ready. They walked through the cemetery together, father and daughter, survivors of a war neither had chosen but both had won. Behind them, Ethan's headstone stood silent, marking a life that had ended but whose meaning had somehow expanded to touch people he would never meet. In his office downtown, Robert Thornton reviewed the latest numbers. The Ethan Thornton Memorial Fund had helped over 300 families in its first 2 years. They'd covered medical expenses, prevented evictions, provided job training, and created a model that other organizations were starting to replicate. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something, and something, Robert had learned, was where everything else started. His phone rang. Marcus, calling from the car. Hey, Lily just read Ethan her letter. You would have been proud. I'm sure I would have been. Send me a picture when you get home. Will do. Oh, and Robert, thank you. For everything. For seeing us when we were invisible. For helping us when we had nothing to offer in return. For being family when we needed it most. Thank you for letting me. For trusting me. For giving my grief somewhere to go besides inward. We should get dinner soon. All of us. Make it official. I'd like that. They hung up. Robert sat in his office, watching the city lights flicker on as evening fell, and thought about the impossible mathematics of love. How giving it away somehow made you richer. How receiving it obligated you to pass it forward. How a $20 bill could become a lifeline, and a lifeline could become a legacy, and a legacy could become the thing that made your son's death mean more than just loss. The city stretched out below him, full of people drowning and people reaching and people walking past. Tomorrow, Robert would wake up and try to notice the ones who needed help. Tomorrow, Marcus would wake up and continue building a life worth living. Tomorrow, Lily would wake up healthy and whole and determined to make her survival matter. But tonight, in this moment, in this quiet space between grief and hope, Robert Thornton allowed himself to feel something he'd thought he'd lost forever. Gratitude. Not for what he had, but for what he'd been able to give. Not for the money, but for the meaning. Not for success, but for connection. The journal entry from Ethan's last days was framed on his wall now. Maybe kindness is money too. Maybe I've been bankrupt my whole life and just didn't know it. You weren't bankrupt, son, Robert said quietly to the empty office. You were rich in all the ways that mattered. It just took me too long to see it. Outside, the city hummed with its million stories of struggle and survival. Inside, a father mourned a son and honored his memory by helping strangers. And somewhere in between, in that liminal space where grief became purpose and loss became legacy, the work continued. One family at a time. One $20 bill at a time. One act of kindness rippling outward until it touched shores no one could have predicted. Because that's what love did. It insisted on meaning where there was none. It found hope in impossible places. It turned tragedy into transformation. And it reminded everyone who witnessed it that sometimes, just sometimes, the world was kinder than we dared to believe.